here. So I'm gonna play through the lick you just heard once slowly, and you have the tabs available on my Patreon, and you have a link in the description. After that, I'm gonna show you what I do when it comes to organizing my practice, and if you had trouble in that area before, you can try these tips and see if they work for you as well. Starting on the 14th fret of the D string. So a lot of the questions that I get from my private students is how can I organize my practice, and what's the best way of doing it? And to be honest, I don't think there's a best way. It's going to depend on your particular situation. But I've tried a bunch of different ways throughout the 30 plus years I've been playing the instrument, and also teaching hundreds, if not probably over 1,000 students at this point. And what tends to work for me, and for a lot of my students as well, is to work in percentages instead. And what I mean by that is that instead of having a strict schedule of I'm gonna do X amount of hours per day or X amount of minutes per day, depending on the importance of guitar in your life, that's going to vary. And some days you're just not gonna have those 2 hours to practice, or 4 hours, or whatever you set your sights at. Now, if you really want to improve your alternate picking technique in a 3 note per string fashion, I've just released a new course, and it's available in the link in the description. That can be very discouraging, and I remember back in my teens when I wrote this perfect practice schedule that was 6 hours long, and I started it too late, so in the day. So basically I was sitting there practicing around 2 o'clock in the morning, and I remember falling asleep with my guitar in my hand, and I had like 7 minutes left of my practice schedule. And not being a very logical teenager, I was super pissed off the next day and was like, oh, everything is destroyed, I missed a day, now everything sucks. And then I was moping about for a few days, and then I wrote the next perfect practice schedule. So the point of that story is to say that you need to be more pragmatic when it comes to this stuff for it to fit into your life. And maybe most of you hopefully aren't as stupid as I was back in the day. And percentages work because if you have, let's say for ease of math, if you have 100 minutes and you have 5 things to work on, then you can basically divide it very easily into percentages. So you can do 20% if you do everything perfectly symmetrical, which I don't think necessarily is the best idea, but let's say we do that in this case. So you have 5 things that you're going to work on. Maybe it's some picking thing, maybe it's some rhythm thing, maybe it's some ear training, whatever it might be. And then you do 20% of that time for each area. So in this case, then that would turn out to be 20 minutes on each thing. So now this is all well and good, but what about the days where you really don't have 100 minutes? Let's say you have 10 minutes. Again, we're keeping the math simple here. Let's say you do 10 minutes, but then it's very easy again because we're working with percentages. So basically you're gonna get 2 minutes for each area. Now 2 minutes for each thing is not gonna do pretty much anything, but it's gonna do one important thing. It's gonna keep you consistent. Because it's very easy to look at your schedule and then be really, angry about that, crap, I can't do my 100 minutes today, so I might as well just skip it. But that's where the mistakes come in, and that's where you end up getting into a slump where you don't practice for days on end. And this is the same thing you can see in fitness as well. So I like to run a lot and strength training and all that stuff. And I found that if I at least do something every day, it's much easier to keep everything rolling. If I start skipping days, that's a real problem, because then it's going to be so hard to get back to it. And I think it's the same for the guitar. So even if you're in a big slump where you don't really want to practice, just listen to music most of that time, right? But still put in as much time as you can, but also maybe put in some technique work, because once you get your inspiration back, it's a way nicer feeling not to feel like everything is off when you try to play. And keeping your technique in shape takes way less time than trying to develop it. Now, what do you practice then? Well, no one can really tell you that except your teacher that knows you, or you have your own priorities. What do you actually want to get better at right now? And I highly suggest that you keep this list fairly short. I tend to work with 3, at the most 5 things, and it's a very specific things that I want to work on. And I know exactly what to do for each of these 3 to 5 things. and it's very easy to just sit down and work on it, right? And as I said before, I don't really like the symmetrical thing when it comes to schedules, because what if you're really inspired one day and you really want to work on a particular lick or a particular technique and it really feels good and you feel like you're making a lot of progress? It's fine to spend like 80% of your practice time doing that. And again, if we go back to our example of 5 things, then you can divide the remaining 4 in the remaining 20%, which is again very easy math, right? So by doing that, you have a focus area, and then you make sure to keep the ball rolling on the other things. But just make sure that whatever you put on that list should be things that you actually want to practice. So if you find that that 5th thing that you always tends to get like 5% of your practice time, maybe reassess and remove that and put something in its place, or just stick with 4 things. So there's no hard and fast rules here, but it's principles that really work well, because I've found that being consistent over time is what's going to give you the greatest results. And then some days you might have a lot of time to practice. Right, you still have your percentages and you still get all the time in that you need and even more. So that's a really good way of moving forward with your playing. Now, final thing here, just make sure that one of these things, I think, should be just playing and having fun, right? So if you have 5 things on the list, 4 things should be things that you want to get better at, meaning you're kind of crappy at them. And the 5th thing or the 3rd thing, or however many things you have on your list, one of those things should be you just having fun. And that's so important, because you can get to a point where you sit there and you go, like, why am I doing this? It's a great exercise, but you didn't start playing guitar to sit around playing stuff like that. Even if you play a melodic technique exercise or whatever it might be, it can just become too serious sometimes, and we sort of lose the reason for doing all this stuff. So that's some ideas that have worked really well for me and also for a lot of my students. So if you have trouble getting yourself organized, give this a try and let me know in the comments if it's helped you.